For as long as Adelaide Finch could remember, the palm house at the Royal Grafton Gardens had felt like a cathedral built for plants. Sunlight sifted through panes of rippled glass, pooling on carpets of moss and ferns, while iron ribs arched overhead like the vaulted ceiling of St. Paul's. Adelaide, newly appointed assistant horticulturist, moved through its moist hush with the same reverence she reserved for church. Conversation fluttered around her like timid sparrows. She spoke little, afraid any utterance might echo louder than she intended, yet she knew every leaf by scent, every petal by texture, every hidden bud by intuition. That April morning, anticipation rustled through the staff nearly as audibly as the fronds of giant cycads. The annual Queen's Exhibition was a fortnight away. Lord Grafton himself had secured a prize specimen, an orchid from Borneo known as Phalaenopsis aurea Victoriae. Ivory petals spangled with gold darts, it was said, and a perfume like sweetened tea. Newspapers had already christened it the Orchid of Empire. Adelaide had tended the 3 nursery plants for weeks, nursing them from shipping shock with sphagnum moss pillows, cinnamon dust, and whispered encouragement no one else heard. She was misting the orchids when she sensed a presence behind her. "You'll spoil them," murmured a voice dry as pressed fern. Mr. Horatio Larkin, the senior curator, loomed in his dove-grey coat, his spectacles rimmed with condensation. Phalaenopsis prefer restraint in watering. Adelaide flushed. "Yes, Mr. Larkin, only a veil of moisture." Her voice, soft and quick, vanished into the humid air. He nodded, adjusting the ledger in his arms. "These blooms are worth more than the Crown's rubies. Lord Grafton demands vigilance." His gaze lingered on the buds as though counting sovereigns. "Lock the Wardian case when you finish." She waited until his footfalls faded, then bent to the orchids once more. They seemed healthy, leaves glossy, roots silver green. Yet a faint unease brushed her thoughts, as though a draught had blown over her shoulders. She dismissed it, secured the latch, and hurried to the propagation shed. The gardens bustled that week. Carpenters raised trellises, seamstresses stitched bunting, and reporters loitered outside the gates, hoping for glimpses of botanical marvels. Among the bustle arrived Miss Eugenia Rathbone, Lord Grafton's niece, fresh from finishing school. She floated through the glass houses in clouds of lilac silk, declaring fascination with exotic flowers. Adelaide, summoned to lead a private tour, stammered through Latin names, while Eugenia's gloved fingers drifted perilously close to fragile specimens. "How clever you are, Miss Finch," Eugenia declared, peering at a dendrobium. "Do you never tire of the quiet?" Adelaide offered a shy smile. "The plants provide excellent company." "I should think so. They never contradict," Eugenia laughed, her bracelets chiming. "I envy your serenity." She paused beside the locked case containing the Phalaenopsis. "Might I smell them?" "I'm afraid only once they open," Adelaide said, directing her gently away. Behind the glass, the buds glimmered, poised on the brink of revelation. That evening, long after visitors left, Adelaide lingered to arrange ferns around a fountain. When she finally returned to the orchid house, she found the Wardian case ajar. Chilled alarm prickled through her. She darted forward, one latch hung loose, its screw half turned out. The orchids themselves, however, remained. She inspected leaves and buds. Nothing appeared bruised or plucked. Perhaps a draught had shifted the pain. Yet the case required a key, held only by Mr. Larkin, Lord Grafton, and the head gardener, Mr. Shaw. And Adelaide herself. Larkin, grudgingly impressed by her devotion, had lent her a duplicate a fortnight prior. She locked the pane firmly, heart fluttering like a trapped moth, and decided against reporting the lapse. Mr. Larkin would accuse her of negligence. Better, she thought, to double her vigilance. 3 nights later, the first blossom unfurled. Adelaide arrived at dawn and caught her breath. The petals were creamier than parchment, their golden speckles tiny suns. She fetched Mr. Shaw, a barrel-chested man with soil ingrained beneath his nails. He whistled low. "Never seen finer," he said, and patted Adelaide's shoulder as though she were one of his granddaughters. "You should be proud, lass." By midday, rumours of the opening flower drew half the garden staff. Eugenia drifted in on a cloud of perfume, Lord Grafton at her side. The peer's walrus moustache twitched approvingly. "Splendid," he boomed. "See, my dear, worth every farthing spent on those infernal expeditions." That night, rain lashed the glass roofs. Thunder rattled panes like rolling marbles. Adelaide finished her rounds, extinguished lanterns, and locked the orchid house. She tucked the master key into her apron pocket and scurried along the gravel path toward the staff cottages. A flash of lightning illuminated a figure ahead. Mr. Larkin, cloak billowing, striding in the opposite direction. "Forgot my ledger," he called when she hailed him. His smile seemed strained in the sudden glare. Adelaide offered to accompany him, but he declined, raising an umbrella as black as a raven's wing. Sleep came fitfully. At dawn, a messenger pounded at the cottage door, summoning her with urgency. Adelaide ran, damp hem flapping, senses tingling with foreboding. In the orchid house, a gaggle of keepers clustered around the Wardian case. Inside, the ivory blossoms drooped, their comely curves warped into sickly bends. One lay on the moss floor, petals browned. Mr. Larkin's face was the colour of ash. "What blight is this?" he demanded. Adelaide opened the case. A pungent almond bitterness rose, nothing like the promised tea fragrance. She inhaled again, puzzled, then stiffened. These were not Phalaenopsis aurea Victoriae. The leaves lacked the silver filament, the labellum bore a reddish spur, and the scent, she knew it from books, resembled one of the most virulent impostors. Phalaenopsis mortua, a South American cousin whose nectar, when concentrated, could induce cardiac collapse. She swallowed. "These are look-alikes, sir. Someone removed the genuine orchids." Lord Grafton arrived, flushed and furious, snatching off his top hat. "Removed? Impossible." Mr. Shaw glared at Adelaide as though the fault were hers. Mr. Larkin's eyes flashed behind spectacles. "Explain yourself, Miss Finch." She steadied her voice. "Observe the shape of the dorsal sepal, the crimson spur. Phalaenopsis mortua is lethally poisonous. Someone has substituted them during the night." Screens of accusation swept across faces. The Wardian case's lock showed no scratches, and the duplicate keys, inventory confirmed, were all accounted for. "Then the culprit is one of us," Lord Grafton growled. Outside, a bell clanged. Dr. Fielding, the garden's physician, had collapsed after sipping tea flavoured with a few petals Eugenia had snipped earlier, for novelty. Panic rippled. The doctor survived thanks to prompt emetics, but Lord Grafton's exhibition now teetered on ruin. That afternoon, Inspector Benedict Lowe arrived from Scotland Yard, his mutton chops bristling with rainwater. He questioned each employee briskly. Adelaide, cheeks flaming, admitted possessing a key. Larkin mentioned seeing her last in the house. Eugenia, pale and tearful, recalled caressing the blooms at Lord Grafton's urging. Motive, means, opportunity. Like vines, suspicion twisted round every staff member. The inspector promised to return tomorrow. As dusk jaundiced the sky, Adelaide slipped back to the orchid house, determined to examine every inch. She carried a candle and her pocket magnifier. Rain tapped the glass overhead like impatient fingertips. Inside, she approached the poisoned impostors. Beneath one leaf she spotted a smear of mud, unusual, for she kept the benches immaculate. The soil was reddish, coarse. From experience she recognized it did not belong to the imported orchid mix, but to the bog beds of the carnivorous conservatory. She crept there next. Pitcher plants gaped like mottled chalices. Sundews glistened with cruel pearls. Near a clump of sarracenia, the bog's surface had been disturbed. Another candle flickered. Someone was there. Adelaide's heart hammered. Out of the shadows stepped Mr. Shaw, holding his lantern low. "Miss Finch, you oughtn't be here after closing." His kindly features were grave. "I forgot my trowel." She tried to keep her tone steady. "Mr. Shaw, have you been in the orchid house lately?" "Only to admire," he said. Yet his boots bore the same reddish mud. Adelaide's instincts whispered caution. She thanked him, hurried away, and almost collided with Eugenia outside the potting shed. The young lady clutched a parasol, though no rain fell. "Adelaide, I am so dreadfully afraid," she whispered. "Uncle wishes to close the gardens till matters are settled. May I confide in you?" Adelaide nodded, surprised. "Yesterday evening I saw Mr. Larkin and Uncle arguing behind the fernery. Uncle said something about debts and securing investment. Then Mr. Larkin mentioned the orchid's value on the private market." She bit her lip. "I thought nothing of it until the flowers withered." Adelaide thanked her, mind whirring. Larkin had motive, money. Shaw had opportunity, muddy boots. She herself had keys, making her an easy scapegoat. Where did Lord Grafton fit? Debts. Adelaide remembered newspaper gossip hinting at gambling losses. That night she could not sleep. Candle lit, she reviewed her botanical manuals. Phalaenopsis mortua, she read, exuded cyanogenic glycosides concentrated particularly in nectar sacs. A powdered extract might masquerade as medicine or poison. Could someone plan to harvest it? But to what purpose? Wind rattled the casement. Adelaide's gaze fell on her cottage floor. The puddle of water beneath her cloak from earlier still bore flecks of bog mud, not hers. Startled, she realized her cloak had hung in the potting shed earlier that day. Anyone might have brushed against it. She crouched, studying the splotches through her magnifier. Embedded within one droplet lay a shard of black glass, curved like a retinal lens, spectacle glass. Mr. Larkin's spectacles. Dawn broke pewter grey. Before the others awoke, Adelaide slipped toward the herbarium, a forbidding wing where dried specimens slumbered in cabinets. Mr. Larkin alone possessed the keys, yet the door stood ajar. Inside, under the sulphurous glow of a single gas sconce, she found a work table strewn with papers, ledgers, and, her breath hitched, 3 withered orchids, unmistakably the original Phalaenopsis aurea Victoriae. Their roots had been wrapped in damp moss for transport, stems cut where the blooms met a vial. And there, arranged like apothecary files, were bottles labelled simply extract. The liquid glimmered amber. She flipped through Larkin's ledger. Entries tallied sums beside cryptic initials. Among them V. Rath, Eugenia Rathbone, another H.S. Harold Shaw, and M.L. Horatio Larkin himself. Notes referred to shares, promissory notes, settlement upon delivery. The delivery, she surmised, was the extract. Mortua's toxin could fetch fortunes as an untraceable poison for those with nefarious leanings. A floorboard creaked. Adelaide spun. Mr. Larkin stood in the doorway, lantern illuminating his angular face. "Curiosity ill becomes a junior," he said, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. Adelaide's pulse roared in her ears. "You stole the orchids," she whispered. "You, Mr. Shaw, perhaps even Lord Grafton, selling poison." He sighed. "Not poison, Miss Finch. Medicine. Certain investors believe mortua holds promise for treating maladies of the heart. They funded our acquisition on condition of secrecy." His mouth twisted. "Then Grafton lost at cards and sought a higher price on the black market. I replaced the orchids, temporarily, to keep up appearances until we purified the extract. I never expected that ninny Eugenia to pluck petals for tea." "Dr. Fielding might have died," Adelaide said, voice rising for once. "A regrettable mishap, no lasting harm." He stepped closer, hand dipping into his coat. "Return to your cottage and forget this, and I shall ensure your promotion." Adelaide's glance darted to the shelves, seeking a weapon. Her fingers brushed a packet of dried aconite, harmless unless ingested. No use. "The inspector returns at noon," she said, stalling. "By then these ledgers will be ash, and so, I fear, will be your reputation should whispers link you to stolen specimens." He withdrew a small vial. "A drop in tea, painless." Before panic could root her to the floor, a knock thundered against the door. "Open, in the Queen's name," Inspector Lowe's voice resounded. Adelaide exhaled, recalling. She had dropped a note beneath his office door that dawn. Larkin's composure shattered. He lunged toward the back exit. Adelaide snatched a tall glass bell jar and swung. It struck his arm. The vial flew, smashing against the cabinet. Almond bitterness flared. Larkin staggered, coughing. The inspector and 2 constables burst in, handkerchiefs pressed to their noses. Amid chaos, Adelaide located the window lever, flung panes open, and cool air flooded the room. They dragged Larkin away in irons. Later, under questioning and weakened by inhaling his own venom, he confessed. Shaw had facilitated soil swaps. Lord Grafton, drowning in gambling debts, had sanctioned the illicit trade. Eugenia, ignorant pawn, had been promised shares in a phantom tonic company. That afternoon, the remaining staff gathered in the tea room, a solemn hush broken only by the clink of porcelain. Inspector Lowe commended Adelaide's courage. Were it not for Miss Finch's botanical acumen, a murderous plot might have flourished unchecked, he announced. Adelaide's cheeks warmed. She found herself gazing down at her hands, surprised to see they no longer trembled. Lord Grafton, stripped of patronage, departed London in disgrace. Mr. Shaw, though complicit, had cooperated once confronted, and was spared prison in exchange for testimony. Eugenia, mortified, resolved to finance legitimate medical research with her portion of the family estate. Under Adelaide's scientific guidance, she insisted. Weeks later, the Palm House basked in mellow May light. On a central pedestal sat 3 new Phalaenopsis, legitimate and thriving. Inspector Lowe visited on a Sunday, minus uniform, bearing a parcel wrapped in brown paper. "A small token," he said, shuffling. Inside lay a leather-bound diary embossed with gold orchids. "For your observations. One never knows when quiet notes may uproot a villain." Adelaide smiled, discovering that shyness need not silence her. She breathed in the gentle scent of living orchids, tea and honey, not almonds, and felt the cathedral-esque glasshouse embrace her like a choir of green voices. The gardens were safe again, not because danger had never existed, but because someone had found the courage to name each flower, and each deception for what it truly was.